Welcome, and we'll start off with a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, let's try this. So first of all, we'll get into the Torah Tamima. And here we are. So here we go with the 7 garments of the high priest, all of which I mentioned have to do with specific kinds of atonement for very specific types of human sinning. And I think, trying to understand what the word sin is, what's the point about sinning, is that it's personal. So I can sin against God, but I can also sin against another person, meaning that I'm doing something that goes against their will and which hurts them in some kind of way. Although clearly, and this is the book of Job brings this out, human beings can't really hurt God, but there's a conceptual sense in which they can. And so it isn't just doing something wrong. It's doing something wrong that has implications. And we know that, especially when it comes to other people, we can do something wrong. We may not even intend to do something wrong, but if it hurts them, there's that factor to be considered. And so the issue of humanity in the presence of the divine is a sort of interesting, I was touching on this yesterday, and being conscious of this and recognizing what true, God has created us with the potential of imperfections. And the reason for that is because if God had created us perfect to begin with, there'd be no purpose to life at all. There's an implication about perfect, meaning that if it's perfect, it can't be improved. Because if it could be improved, then by definition, it wouldn't be perfect. So the fact that there's a purpose to human beings is directly dependent on the fact that we are imperfect, which means, and also, of course, there's also an additional element of free will. It's limited. It's far more limited than we think or would like to think, but regardless, we do have that space to make some choices. And for that reason, be responsible, meaning we both are deserving of negative consequences, but certainly also reward and positive consequences. So, one can live one's life in the anticipation of something very lovely happening if you, in fact, try to devote your life to perfecting it. But the fact is that a lot of humanity just ignores that particular issue. And so here we have whatever we struggle with to understand the divine, and in contrast, the human relationship to it. And so much of what's going on here and what we're reading about, and especially when it comes to the high priest, has to do with the idea of some kind of reconciliation between this divide that goes on, that we're being made conscious of. So the garments of the high priest, each garment comes to atone for a specific type of sin. And I have mentioned to you, and I'm pretty certain of this, although I want to go back and do some more research on it, that the Ephod, which we're talking about, a word that is a Hebrew word that is untranslatable in English, although it kind of means a skirt of something, or an apron, you'll see, possibly a tunic, that it comes to atone for idolatry. And I've been thinking a lot lately about the implications of the golden calf, a sin that we're going to come across, and which is considered to be the very essential nature of sin, and what the golden calf represents, and to the degree in which the golden calf is alive and kicking and influencing human beings. And essentially, it's when people put their complete sense of security and success and power and all those kinds of things and attach it to money. And looking at how that influences people's choices. So again, trying to take a religious perspective of things, you look at what is it to believe in something? And what is it to make something your God? What does that really mean in practical terms? And essentially, there's so many implications that just flow from that and that have to do with the choices that we make and the values that we consequently have as a result of what we make our God. So if we're conscious of that, and if we're mindful of what we want to have as our ultimate source of success, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that has huge implications for the kind of life we live and for all kinds of other things. So
I just wonder, why did you choose money? I mean, why did you specify money? Are you connecting the golden calf with like gold?
correct.
Meaning money?
Yes, exactly.
Uh-huh.
That is exactly what we're talking about. Yes.
Uh-huh.
So the golden calf is a metaphor for people's reliance on money. In this case, because I mean, obviously at one time people used barter. You could certainly generalize if there's societies that don't utilize money. And money, of course, we mean any kind of financial accumulation that a person can have, which you can use then as a source of power. And essentially money is that. So
well, people, what I'm thinking is people do worship other things as well, but
yes, they do.
But you're saying that's the main one?
I believe it is. Yes, I'm not saying it to be unique and the only thing people worship that might be a matter of idolatry. People can worship power and not necessarily associate it with money. And certainly we could go into those kinds of things. But it does seem to me that the common mistake and pitfall has to do with financial, accumulation. I mean, look at how we single out and imply honor to people. The fact that we even sort of categorize people as billionaires and millionaires and trillionaires, and and we realize the vast amount of power it also brings with it. Because you can pay for so many things, and you're able to accomplish that. So, by the way, I should also say that it is not a sin to be wealthy in Jewish tradition. That is not a sin. But there's a responsibility that goes along with it. That essentially, if we seek to be, financially well off, part of the idea is not simply to take care of ourselves and our own families. The idea is that it puts you in a position where you can help society in profound kinds of ways. And so just being wealthy in and of itself is not a bad thing, or being a wealthy person. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was known to be wealthy. So it says, there's a statement in the tradition that says God wants different things from the rich and from the poor. From the rich, God wants to see if they're willing to take their substance and share it and make it possible to bring comfort and, help to people who are not in that position. And from the poor, God wants to see if they won't be tempted to steal. So, and that is a serious thing. That is a serious temptation when you're poor. You sometimes try to justify, your stealing from others. So I think, obviously everything is a question of perspective and balance and stuff like that. But I have a feeling that part of the reason, Shira Beth, is that I'm going in this direction also is precisely because the first garment that we're going to deal with is the Ephod, and there is so much that goes into the Ephod. Here we go. Ve'ela habagadim asher yasu. These are the clothes that they will make. The Israelites, right? They're creating these things for the tabernacle. Choshen. Choshen is a breastplate. So the piece that went on the chest of the high priest. The ephod, there's the ephod. Ume'il, the me'il was a light blue cloak or a robe, probably a robe that the priest wore underneath the ephod. I'm going to try and show you some illustrations. And this robe, which is described a little later, had bells and what they call pomegranates on the fringe at the bottom. So there was a bell and a pomegranate. The pomegranate made out of cloth, right, out of threads. Uketonet. A ketonet was like a shirt, right, a shirt. Tashbetz, I've translated it as checkered. There are other translations. I think another translation says fringed. The illustrations that I've seen in this one book that you know I love very much shows sort of indentations in the material, that the fabric is woven in such a way that even though it's all made out of the same fabric, there are sort of indentations in the fabric itself. And this was worn directly on the skin. This ketonet, tashbetz. Mitznefet would be a headdress. You know, you have an idea of the headdress of the high priest, what it looked like a turban. And it really, again, the illustrations there show it made up of just a long, long strip of cloth that would have been wound around his head. The avnate and a sash. And the sash would go, again, underneath around the tunic. And again, to divide the upper part of the body from the lower part of the body, and what that symbolizes. And in fact, there are Hasidim today, right? Or people, not necessarily Hasidim, but people who are very Orthodox, who when they go and they pray, they put on what is called a gartel, right? Before they pray. Va'asu big day kodesh, and they should make holy garments, la'aharon achicha, for Aaron, your brother. I've pondered a little bit about why it says Aharon Achicha. I mean, clearly on the surface, it points out which Aharon. There could have been more than one Aharon, but I felt that there was something also suggestive about saying your brother, and possibly your brothers to imply that Moses might have been jealous of Aaron, and for him to understand that he should not be jealous. Ulevanav, and for his children, lachahanoli, to minister to me. So I'm going to try now to go to some illustrations. I'm going to see if I can do this. Okay, here goes. So here is some sketches, and this is the Ephod, right? So there are different versions. So this is according to Rashi, by the way, Lashitat Rashi, it says here. And this is the Rashbam, Rashi's grandson. This is the back of the Ephod. And the way Rashi describes it, it has these two shoulder pieces. We're looking at it from the back now, right? And right here, these little squares represent the settings where the onyx stones were placed on his shoulders. And right here, excuse me one second, of course, that's the breastpiece. And these were golden chains where it hung from, but there were also ribbons from the back, two blue ribbons, which held this in place so that it wouldn't move. You can see that there are 12 stones representing the 12 tribes. Okay, so these look similar. And look at the back. So according to the Rashbam, it also went up like that. And the shoulder pieces came across just like that. You see on the front there? So that's the Rashbam. Let me see what I can do here, just to show you some illustrations. Did that work for you? Are you seeing a different picture now? And he actually, yeah, so there's the breastpiece. You can see the ribbon with which it was attached to the bottom, you know, the bottom or the top front part of the Ephod. And he gives you actually the tribes here. And the stones are mentioned specifically, and you know, trying to remember, these are names. So when they're names of objects like stones or plants or birds, or, you know, it's very difficult to translate these things. And we depend very much on the tradition to help us understand what these specific stones were.
Is there a reason that it shows Issachar and Zebulun as dark?
Just the color of the stones, I suspect. They're trying to, you know, given the fact that it's a black and white picture, I think they're just trying to do that. I'm trying to think. I mean, Issachar and Zebulun were direct brothers. They were Leah's children, right?
It says turquoise and sapphire.
Yeah, so it's just, you know, I don't, we shouldn't take this.
Or wait a minute. That should be sapphire and amethyst. The
So
if
they're
we're
all-
going from right to left when
Yes,
we
we are.
have it in Torah, right? We
Right,
assume it's right to left.
yes, yes,
So they're all different colors.
they are, all different
They
stones.
are.
all
Yeah,
different
there.
stones.
It's at 17.
Okay,
The list
And-
of them is at 17.
At,
It-
at a different time, do they go into the specific values of each of the stones, like their hardness and why one got, you know, say an emerald with a very hard composition and lapis or onyx that's very soft, a semi-precious stone versus a precious stone?
So this would not be in the Torah itself. I don't believe the Talmud goes into that. This is something that tends to be discussed by other commentators, by later commentators, and who try to then base, you know, their comments on, you know, whatever evidence they have, both within the text and outside the text to see. You know, again, how one judges the value of a commentary in terms of what sense it makes and how consistent it is with everything else. So I think that the color or certainly not necessarily the structure of the stone might not be something that's in certainly any of the earlier ones, but I imagine that the color or the name of the stone possibly, or things like that. I haven't, you know, my knowledge is not encyclopedic, but it wouldn't surprise me, you know, if there were commentaries that try to analyze the specific stones and perhaps even why they might go with a specific tribe.
Thank you.
You bet. I mean, it's a great question, and it's something, you know, again, these commentaries are based on the kinds of questions that occur in people's minds.
There's 7 Rashis on this verse.
I bet.
Lot of stuff on this. Well,
What
we'll get into this, but I felt it was helpful to show you the illustrations first, so you can see some of them. This little piece here, you know, I'm not sure about the coloring of this because I think it's supposed to be the robe. And this is the ephod. Here is that robe, that blue robe. And if you look very, very carefully, I don't think my enlarging it's going to help a lot, but there were bells and pomegranates at the bottom so that when he'd walk, he'd sort of tinkle, right? Let's try another one. Let's see what this is. Oh, this is a very nice sketch, right, of the various garments. Here is the headdress. This would have been for a regular priest, okay? But I love the sort of Bermuda shorts he has that go next to his skin. So he wears undergarments, right? And then,
Linen.
yeah, that's right. Well, at least linen I think is absorbing. It's not like wool.
Mhm.
So
That's
that's
true.
helpful, right? This is just helpful, and some other things here. This is from that book that I have. Very similar. They are illustrations. This is this light colored robe that he has, and there's this sash here that holds this breastplate in place. You can see some of the colors of the stones here. And here's the onyx, right? The onyx on his shoulders. And it mentions, the Torah mentions these gold clasps that hold us in place. And finally, I think this would be according to Rashi, a colored illustration. So of the high priest, of the ephod. In the book that I have, what I like very much, and I couldn't find it, was they have the ephod laid out so that you can see it not on the priest, but just simply laid out flat, and you can see the various elements to it, and it's very helpful. So
The black and white illustration that you showed of the ephod had a kind of floral pattern, and this is more of a geometric pattern.
correct, right? So, yeah. Okay, Shira Beth, thank you for your chat. I'm going to I'm doing the link right now. Okay, so hopefully I'll have it after we're done. I'm going to stop this share and we're going to try and dive into the Rashi. there's a lot that Rashi has to say. So you can see I wanted to try and be accurate.
Here.
Rabbi is gone. Ah,
And he's back.
A second, I'm back. My connection might have been not good. I'm going to have to try and find the place again now. All right. Okay. Here we are. So, Choshen, the breastplate. Tachshit is the Hebrew word for an ornament, something like that. Neged halev, which went opposite the heart. The Ephod, here we go. Hold on to your yarmulkes. Lo shamati, I have not learned. I never learned. And he says, shahu lavush. This is parenthetical. It's not in all versions of Rashi, but it means that it is an article of clothing. That's what that would mean. The lo matzati, and I never found, I wasn't able to find babaraita in any early text. So again, I know I've explained this before. The word baraita is an Aramaic word. The ta ending should be a clue that it's Aramaic, and it means outside. That's what the word literally means, outside. And that refers to a source that is contemporary with the Mishnah. The Mishnah was compiled around the year 200 of our counting, and it contains material that precedes that date. Basically, it is the written down version, written down version of the oral law, edited by Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. It was an emergency move on his part because the Romans were forbidding the study of Torah at pain of death, and he was concerned that it would be forgotten if it wasn't written down. Prior to that time, it was essentially forbidden to write down oral law in any sort of organized way. We are aware of attempts to sort of summarize it or give you cliff notes or things to help you remember it because it was such a vast amount of material to memorize. At any rate, there is stuff that's included in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is extant. We have it even today. And there is also material that is of the same time period, but is not included in the Mishnah. Many of these are found. There's actually a collection of Baraitot called the Tosefta, which is it parallels in organization the Mishnah, and that contains, all of it is Baraita, and the Gemara, the Talmud, contains many, many, many Baraitot as well. So Rashi is saying he has not been able to locate an early source, Perush Tavnito, an explanation of its design. V'libi omer, so he says, in my humble opinion. This is what I've been able to figure out. This is what he says. Omerli, my heart, literally it says, tells me, Shehu chagur lo me'acharav, that it was tied from behind. Okay, in other words, and he goes on to say, rochbo kerochav gav ish, that its width was the width of a person's back. Okay, kemin sinar, as a kind of an apron. Shekorin, and here we have a French word. I'm not sure I don't know if it's for something in French. And the German looks like the word shirt. I looked up the German as best as I could, but it didn't come up with anything other than shirt. So I don't want to call it a tunic, and it really isn't a shirt, right? It doesn't have sleeves. So I'm not sure what this is, but it looks like shirts is what this word looks like. Shachagurot hasarot, that the women of rank tie on, kesherochvot al hasusim, when they ride on horses. So it's a riding skirt of some kind or a riding apron that women would use, yes. So you tie it around. The protection is from the back, okay? And unlike, it's like the reverse of an apron, of how you wear an apron because of what you want to protect, okay? Kach ma'asehu milamata. That's what it looks like on the lower part of it. And he gives also some, he uses his vast knowledge to use whatever sources he can to support his explanation of it. So Shneimar always introduces a scriptural quote, and this is in the second book of Samuel, chapter 6, V'David chagur ephod. There it is, right? Ephod bad. And David was girt in a linen tunic. That's where and ne'epad, I think, means sort of, encircled, girt. Lamadnu sheha ephod, and from the context of that story back in Samuel, we learn that the ephod is chagurahi. It has to be something that's tied on because of the verb that is used here. It doesn't say v'David lovesh. It says David chagur, that he's girt with it. So we understand that it is a kind of a tied garment. Ve'if shar lomar. These letters were so badly written, so badly printed. I was struggling to figure out what it was, and I went to Safaria because they have it printed very nicely, neatly. Lomar, if shalomar, you cannot say she'ein bo ela chagura levada, but you can't say it's just a belt. It isn't just that, okay? Sha'arei ne'emar, because it says elsewhere in Vayikra 8, this, if I'm correct, in Leviticus chapter 8, Vayitain alav et ha'ephod, because it says, okay, you can't say it's the belt, because it says there, you should place upon Aaron the ephod, and afterwards it says, Vayachgor oto becheshev ha'ephod, and you should gird it on him, tie it on him with the belt of the ephod. Well, if we're talking about the belt of the ephod, we can't be talking about the ephod, which is proving Rashi's point. He goes on to say that, let's see, make sure I've got it. Yes, the Tirgum Onkelos, and Onkelos translates the Hebrew into the Aramaic, Behemyan Afoda. Okay, with the belt, a hemyan is something that secures, right? Secures the article of clothing on you, which is, of course, what a belt does. It secures the garment to you, to your body. So with the belt of the ephod, lamadnu, we can infer from this, shehacheshev hu hachagur, okay, that the cheshev, what they call the cheshev of the ephod, and we'll come across it, is the belt part. V'ha'ephod shem tachshit levado, and the ephod is the name of this ornamented garment by itself. The if shar lomar, and you cannot say she'al shem shtei haktefot shebo hu karui ephod, that it's called an ephod because of these two parts that, you saw the shoulder pieces. In other words, it comes up over the shoulder. That is not the ephod. Shaharei ne'emar, because it says, again, it states explicitly, shtei kitfot ha'ephod. It says these two shoulder pieces of the ephod. Lamadnu, and so again, we can infer, shaha'ephod shem levad, that the ephod is one kind of garment, one kind of term. V'haktefot hem levad, they're a separate element of it. Sorry, I am going to, I think this is a chet here. V'hechshav sham shem levad, oh no, sorry. Right, I'm sorry. This is when the print is so bad, you have to sort of figure out what it is. V'hacheshev, this part of the ephod that they describe as the cheshev, the belt, right? Shem levad, it's a separate term. L'chach ani omer, and for this reason I say, she'al shem hasinar shel mata on account of this apron that is at the bottom of all these other pieces that he mentions. Karui Ephod. It's called an Ephod. Al Shem She Ipdu, okay, or Ofdo, because it girded him, it wrapped around him, Umikashto, and it literally lakashet means to decorate, okay? But it makes him look, just like clothing, tries to make us look more attractive because of the clothing. Bo. So he wraps this around him and he adorns himself with it. Kamoshene Amar, as it says, Vayepod lo, okay, he wrapped himself with the ephod. V'hacheshev, and the cheshev, hu chagur shalmala hemenu, and the cheshev is wrapped around or tied above it. V'hatefot kvuot bo, and the shoulder pieces are then attached to that. And again, I'm hoping to have some pictures for you so you can see exactly what he's talking about. And if you'll give me a moment, I'm going to find the place again. Okay. All right, so we're here, right here. And I'll mark this here so that we know where to start tomorrow. All right, so let me stop the recording. Thank you, and I hope people found this interesting.